So I'm going to let them, oh, they're all coming in. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for your patience in the waiting room. Welcome back to the Goldster Inside Story, and I'm very happy today to welcome a really wonderful author, an author of many novels, including this one, which I cannot recommend highly enough. I've been utterly lost in this book, The Three Graces. Welcome, Amanda Craig. It's lovely to have you on Goldster. I think we still got a bit of satellite delay in Italy. Can you hear me now, Amanda?
Yes.
Great. I just gave you a big.
But there's a lag.
Oh, this might be a problem.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you're in Italy, which is very appropriate because the book is set in Italy. Tell us about the Three Graces.
Yeah. Well, the Three Graces are three friends in their 80s who have retired to Tuscany. They're three very different women. One is an aristocratic English lady with a demented husband called Diana. One is an American psychologist, psychotherapist, sorry, a former doctor who's now farming an organic farm. And one is Marta, who's a German concert pianist. And they're three women who probably wouldn't have been friends had they not been neighbors. But they are neighbors, and they are having, as it were, their last adventure before dementia, as one of them puts it. And they get involved in helping an illegal immigrant. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
And various grandchildren. There's one of them, Ruth, who is hosting her grandson's very swanky wedding. And it's all going terribly wrong.
And it's a wonderful cast of characters. A really fantastic cast of characters, including, of course, the grandson's bride-to-be, who is an influencer. And I was very interested in how you created such an array of characters who were all very believable, from this older generation who are of a world that seems to be disappearing, and then this upcoming generation who are very different from each other as well in the younger generation. I'm thinking of Zan and Tanya and Raf, and how you managed to just really make it work and to get into all age groups. Do you find it easy to write about people of different ages?
Well, no writing is easy, but this book, which I wrote during the darkest days of lockdown, did actually come quite surprisingly easily, partly because the three main characters and one of the grandsons are people that I've already written about before. All 9 of my novels, you can read them individually, but they're all interconnected. So one or two of these characters, such as Tanya, the influencers, readers will have met before, perhaps as children. So, you know, from that point of view, that in my mind, they've been established for many, many years. But also, I just felt very strongly that I wanted to write about older people, and specifically older women, because it seems to me that not only are they fascinating in themselves, but they're totally different from the way that they tend to be represented in literature. So they, you know, the classic one is Miss Marple, who's practically 100 years out of date now, because the women who are now in their 80s are the boomers. You know, they're people who broke all the rules. You know, they danced to Mick Jagger. They took drugs, possibly they had a very active love life. And I couldn't see those people being represented anywhere in fiction, literary or popular. Mostly the portraits were always of people with dementia, and it was all very tragic. And I thought, well, the older women I know are nothing like this. They're still very much themselves. They're hilariously funny and very bold and outspoken. And I want to write about this. So that was, in a way, the start of the Three Graces.
And there's a wonderful comment. I think it might be Ruth at some point, who talks about how everybody perceives older people to be, to just be past it. And she talks about how each decade has been different. And she was amazed at how wonderful her 70s was. And, the 60s have been great, but then her 70s was even better. And she's excited about her 80s. And we do get a real sense of the fact that these are real people. And also, as you say, they wouldn't have been friends had they been in their own sphere. But this, you talk about how the characters meet, and obviously it's proximity and the fact that they need help because they are all older and there's things in life that they need help with. And it's a lovely, touching example of friendship because they do have each other's backs. They really take care of each other in a way that they probably wouldn't have done if they weren't transplanted to Italy. I know that Italy is very, very important to you. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Italy and the role it has in your life?
Well, Italy's huge in my life because I grew up here. And my parents lived in Italy, more in Rome than in Tuscany in the beginning, because my father worked for the UN. But I still think of it in a way as home. I've been here since I was 6. And although I now live in London and I passionately love Britain, I also feel part Italian. I speak Italian, foreign mannerisms. I use my hands quite a lot, all that sort of thing. And I think the enormous benefit is that I can see both European and British cultures a little bit from the inside as well as from the outside. And that's always a wonderful thing for a novelist.
Yes. It gave me a real insight as well into Italian way of thinking about such things as Brexit and migration and all of these different things. We've got so many great themes in here of what is affecting kind of the state of Europe, not a state of the nation, but the state of Europe really in this book, and how it really makes you think about the way that people view each other. When thinking of Enzo, one of your characters, who doesn't like anyone who's not Tuscan, and anyone who's a foreigner unless they're from Tuscany. It's a really interesting, way of, of looking at another country from somebody's eyes who's lived there, but isn't necessarily of there initially. We have a comment here saying, "Thank goodness we have a champion," as in older women having a champion. And a question I think you've already answered: how did your parents end up in Italy? What were their jobs? And you said your father worked for the UN, and that's how.
Yes, there's a branch of the UN in Rome called the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, and he ran their press office for many, many years. And one sort of incidental aspect of that on my work is that I did grow up, really hyper conscious of how dreadful conditions were in the third world. I grew up with photographs of, children with enormous bellies, and I remember asking my father, but how can these children like me be starving when they've got such big stomachs? And he said, no, it's not because they're full. It's because they're starving and their stomachs are full of air. And that was incredibly shocking. My novels for a long time have been genuinely multicultural. I'm very interested in people who are not just from Britain. And indeed, part of the plot in this novel is to do with the vast influx of migrants, illegal migrants, through Italy from North Africa. And these 3 old ladies do become involved in helping an illegal migrant. And as very often in my novels, there's also a murder or a death. And I do hope. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, right? We can hear you.
I do hope. Yes. I do hope that when I'm writing about this, I'm not taking sides. I'm not lecturing people, and I'm definitely not using the horrors of this just to entertain people. I do believe in doing what Lucinda, your illustrious ancestor Charles Dickens, did, which is to entertain and move and to make people laugh and to make people cry. You know, I believe in fiction that does all that and that tells a powerful story.
I think that you do succeed very well, because there is a message here. You know, when you first start reading the book and we've got Enzo's opinions, and you think, really? And then you realize and actually it's a very good way of talking about migration, from both sides. So yes, it's a really interesting way of writing about it. I'd just like to talk a little bit about your characters. So when you create your characters, do they suddenly come into your head fully formed? How much do you sit and worry about them? Do they some of them are ongoing, obviously?
I absolutely live with my characters. You know, I feel that I have a kind of dual life, both the real me and the person that's just constantly thinking about them. I do very much create them. You know, they're little bits of everybody I've ever heard and known in all my novels. You know, they're little fragments of things that people have said. I thought, oh, I can put that into Marta, or I can put that into Zan, or whatever. And that's great fun, as long as people don't think it's this character is them, which is always the worry.
Oh, yeah. Always.
Always. And I had a particularly dreadful experience of that about 25 years ago, which I can talk about if you want, with a novel called The Vicious Circle.
Is that because somebody thought that
I love thinking about them. I mean, I love all my characters, including this was quite a famous case where there was an ex-boyfriend that I'd been at university with, who was determined that he was the villain in A Vicious Circle, and this dreadful man could only possibly be him. I mean, he was an absolute idiot, especially because he was also a leading literary critic. But it was a very horrible experience. I did get dropped by the original publisher, Hamish Hamilton, because they were very cowardly. And unless you're Salman Rushdie, a lot of publishers will not defend authors. But rather wonderfully, once I found a libel lawyer who said, no, this is ridiculous. This is perfectly publishable. You just need to tweak little details and make them even more distant from this wretched man. It's publishable. So then I had 3 times more money for the same book.
Excellent.
And Penguin did not dare to ask for their advance back. So it is how we were able to move to a rather nicer, bigger house in Camden Town.
So in the end, it worked in your favor.
In the end, it did. I mean, I don't recommend it to anyone. And it was very unpleasant, but it is one of the great perils of writing contemporary fiction, which I do ardently believe in doing. I mean, I do enjoy historical fiction, but it does kind of upset me the way that especially since Hilary Mantel, it seems to be taken so much more seriously than contemporary fiction, because let me tell you, to write a contemporary novel takes just as much, actually, I think more research. So, yeah.
So because the satellite delay, I managed to interrupt a point you were making. You were saying, I love my characters, and then my question came in. Do you remember what you were going to say then?
I love my characters, including the bad ones. I especially love the baddies.
Yeah.
I mean, the baddies are also not me, but there is a kind of joy in letting out opinions that I totally disagree with. I mean, for instance, one of the three Graces, who's this English woman who's a Viscountess, has the attitudes and I'm afraid the racism of that class and generation, and she says things that are really pretty full on. And I had quite a tussle with my lovely publisher Richard Beswick, who is very much, I sort of tease him for being a Homo Islingtoniensis. He said, I think we have to tone her down. You know, some of these things, they're so offensive that she says.
She's so
but
real.
I said, no, she is real, and she's the grit in the oyster. You know, she's really key as a counter to the rest. And you know, many readers find that she's their favorite character, and I'm afraid some of them even agree with her. But you know,
she does have to change
leave
her
it for readers to judge.
in the book. She's confronted by her own
change.
prejudices, isn't she? And I think that's a really good way of doing it, that characterization of seeing this woman who's been part of the empire, you know, living in Zimbabwe when it was still called Rhodesia, and you know, taking those attitudes, and then of course having to realize that actually her opinions are different from, you know, are outdated, and that she changes her ideas. So I think she's a very important character. I'm glad you didn't bow to pressure to change her, because we see her journey and we also know that she exists. I can think of many people like her who exist. So there's no point in kind of, you know, changing history, really.
Well, no, there isn't. And I was especially pleased this morning, actually, to get a message on Twitter from a Black Zimbabwean reader who absolutely loves this book, and you know, seems to think that you know, I've got it right. So I'm really pleased by that.
Yeah, that's really good. So we're talking about, you know, older women, and the fact that you were saying there's very few role models, you know, positive and also realistic role models. There's recently been quite an upsurge of older female writers, looking at people such as Bonnie Garmus and her recent success with Lessons in Chemistry. Do you think that older female writers are starting to be more recognized?
I think they are. Yes, I hope they are. You know, by old.
Oh, I'm sorry, we've lost you, Amanda.
Women, you can mean anything from 60 plus, and my characters are 80 plus. Stable. Can you hear me again?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
No?
Yes,
you can. Okay. I've been very annoyed by a few pieces recently claiming that middle-aged women feel invisible, because I don't know about you, but I don't feel invisible one bit. And I think that older, you know, even older people, you know, if obviously you need to have health, that is critical, and you need ideally not to be, you know, suffering from loss of hearing or sight or something. But you know, if you are still the same, I don't see why you should be invisible at all. I think that's an incredibly old-fashioned idea, that women are only visible if they're young and gorgeous. We live in a time where more and more people, in fact, are older, and older people are wealthier. If anything, it's the young invisible, and I think that's why they're so terribly angry. I mean, that's a whole other section, which is Zan, you know, Martha's grandson.
Yeah.
And I think those are the people who feel that they have no power and no visibility. And you know, that is a kind of ongoing war between the boomers and the Generation Zs, as I think they're called. So that is very much part of this novel.
Yes. So when you when we're talking about, you know, that I've looked at your Twitter page as well, and we're talking about these representations of women, there was an article recently, and I totally agreed with you. There was about on thinness and women, and there's an article written, "Just when can women let ourselves go?" Tell us what you feel about that, because you brought that article to, and you wrote a very amusing tweet about, you know, how on earth you're meant to be slim when you sit on your bottom at you know, writing all day. But there's a really serious message there, isn't there? So talk us a little bit about the Martha Stewart thing and Joan Didion and all that.
You can't be. Yes. Well, absolutely. Well, you know, some people are genetically blessed. They wouldn't be seeing it as genetically blessed if they lived in an era where food was scarcer, and we may yet be getting to that stage. But yes, I mean, most of most of my friends are writers, and most of my women friends particularly, and almost all of us, unless they are anorexics, struggle with our weight. It's just part and parcel of having to sit very, very still for many, many hours of the day to catch all those thoughts and create those characters and weave that plot. You can't do that when you're rushing around to the gym. I mean, I do have a long walk every morning. Again, something I learned from Dickens. And that helps me think. But actually, the real work of being a writer is writing, is sitting and writing until your bottom hurts. And, you just have to kind of, it is a kind of endurance feat every single day. I think often when people want to be writers, they see writing as a kind of a holiday from their lives, as freedom. And let me tell you, writing is not freedom. It's sitting in the same room, staring at a blank wall. Because if you have anything nice or interesting to look at, you will look at that instead of writing. I'm also obsessively clean because, of course, housework is so much preferable to doing and writing. It's better than writing. But you only discover this really when you write. It's not an escape at all.
Yes. One of my favourite places to research is the National Art Library at the V&A in London. And I tried going there to write, and it's absolutely impossible because all you do is look out of the window at the beautiful landscape garden and the children playing in the fountain and the gorgeous architecture. And I thought, I'm not getting any writing done. I need to go home and sit in my flat and not try and write here, because it's such a distraction. We have a question here about your process. Do you prepare all the chapters before you start, or do they develop organically? Great question. Thank you for that.
Very good question. The answer is no, they do develop organically. What I do, and I learned this from P.G. Wodehouse, believe it or not, is I have a page and a half of just one line per chapter with a rough idea of what happens in each chapter. And I can't begin to write until I've got both the first line and the last line of the book. So I always know how enormous labor is what's now called the story arc, what happens in between. And I'm not sure that you can still hear me.
No, we can. Yeah. I'm finding it really interesting that you have the first and the last line of the whole book, not per chapter, of the whole book. Yeah.
The whole book, yeah.
That's a great tip.
And also, I mean, I can't.
Sorry, Amanda, we lost you there. You were just saying you can't.
Well, I don't know. Everybody writes differently.
Yeah.
The book that I'm writing, can't hear. I don't know if you can hear me again.
Yeah, we can.
I can't finish the book until I've got the idea. Can hear me now? Okay. I can't finish a book until I know what the next one is going to be. So I always have at least one, if not two, novels kind of stacked up to get on with. I can't explain this. It's a total mystery why that's the case. But it's a weird process. I envy those people that you see in films, all those writers in films, and they have this enormous whiteboard and they're scribbling all these details of their plot and how it all connects up. I couldn't begin to write like that.
We've got another interesting question here. Do you ever change your first line once the book is finished?
No.
No. Gosh, no. That's so impressive.
And no, it's just how it is.
Yeah. Now, somebody has asked a question. Could you please tell us a bit more about Enzo?
Enzo. Well, Enzo is based on many, many Italians who I've known and loved. You know, he's a charming, handsome, kind, honest man who just also happens to be a raving racist. And again, even his racism is quite a mixture, because he's not only racist about Black people, he's also racist about people from Umbria, you know, the county next door. And that is very classic in Italy, which after all is quite a young country. You know, it was made up of many different countries, and even within those countries, you know, Tuscany was a principality, different towns and different villages all kind of hate and distrust each other. So I thought this would be a very funny thing to explore. We have a little bit of it, I think, in Britain. I mean, if you only have to think about the hostility between the Cornish and the British, which I wrote about in my previous novel, The Golden Rule, or between the North and the South, but it's nothing compared to what I think you get in Tuscany. So here too, I think it is slowly changing. I mean, let me be clear, you would never have an ordinary Italian or a Tuscan being openly horrible about a Black person to their face. They're extremely courteous, but they might well shoot them from their bedroom window if they thought they were being burgled.
Which is what
Enzo does.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, and it's so interesting, Enzo's journey, because of course we know, I don't want to do any spoilers, but begins, right at the beginning that he's shot somebody, and then his turmoil because he doesn't know if that person is alive or dead and who it was that he shot. And that way that plays throughout his character is a really interesting way of seeing him develop. And we also see his great loneliness, that he is pushes away everybody who could be friends with him because he has these crazy prejudices, and yet he's a desperately lonely man who's who needs that friendship. And if it weren't for these three women who are there, and they kind of pay him to do pretty much everything, picking up their relatives from the airport and helping them with their homes, if it weren't for them, you wonder what Enzo would have ended up like, because they seem to almost have saved him from himself. And it's a great
Yes, it's very much a symbiotic relationship. And again, this novel is set against the background of all sorts of really kind of serious issues that Italy faces, which is that it's now having a negative birth rate. There are not enough children, and there's certainly not enough people, as in Britain, to look after the elderly and help them. And Enzo's made this unfortunate marriage to an American that hasn't lasted. He is very unhappy, but because of himself, and that was interesting to do, because I think one of the things that I'm very sad about at the moment is how intolerant a lot of readers have become, particularly young readers, which is they want people to be all good or all bad. And if you're, even just a little bit older and wiser than that, that is never the case. People are not all one thing or all one, other thing. And what is fun for me as a writer, and I hope for my readers, is that you can show how people can modify their views and their behavior. And to me, that is really one of the moral purposes of literature. To as readers, you might start to make that kind of journey yourself if you think about it. I know, I myself have been hugely changed by the books that I have read over now 6 decades of being alive.
There's so much of it. Oh, somebody wants to know how old Enzo would be. Very interested in Enzo.
Yes, very, very interested in Enzo. Well, he is very gorgeous in Italian. He is in his mid-40s. So, and he's got, when he lost his daughter, because his daughter was taken back to America by his ex-wife, she was 8, and she's now 13, 14. So yeah, and it's a terrible thing for fathers as well as mothers to lose their child. You know, that's a huge thing in people's lives. Is, you know, the worst thing I'm told about divorcing is losing that child, that hope into the future.
Particularly when different countries
feel for Enzo very, very deeply. Yeah. Well, very close to my heart because sorry, I've missed that.
So let's talk about Blessing.
Blessing, yes. Well, Blessing is, of course, the young Zimbabwean who Enzo has shot. And it turns out that he hasn't just happened to turn up on this hillside in Tuscany. There is a reason, which I won't.
Don't give too many spoilers.
I won't give too many spoilers. But Enzo is a character who is actually connected very strongly to one of my other previous books called Hearts and Minds, which also has a Zimbabwean and an older man, but that was written in 2008. So various things have happened since then. And I am particularly interested in Zimbabweans because I was actually born in South Africa and left it when I was a babe in arms because my parents hated apartheid. But my mother's brother was a white farmer in Zimbabwe, and I used to hear these various sort of snippets from my uncle's letters, you know, about the terrorists, you know, now the people who, you know, i.e. the native Black people who wanted to have land and a life. And that was, again, something that was always in my mind, you know, that this struggle and the struggle for freedom and the struggle for land. And, you know, yet there were also these people, you know, the white people also felt that they were, I'm afraid, entitled to be there. And in some cases had been there for 3 or more generations. So, you know, I'm not telling people what to think, but as I said, I was very, very pleased to get this message from a Black Zimbabwean reader saying how wonderful she thought this novel was. So,
and Blessing is a really lovely character, and I don't want to give any spoilers either, but you know, the way that his story develops and the way, one thing it really shows is because, and I think I can say this because it happens at the beginning, is that he's taken for a wedding guest because there are so many people appearing, and we have this kind of vacuousness of this younger generation who are getting married and very kind of thoughtless, Generation Z.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the contrast between that, because the older generation, and we've got the middle generation, people like Raf and Juicy, who seem to have their lives so much more sorted. And here we have this young up and coming generation where the bride to be is, you know, she's got millions of followers on Instagram and she constantly receives all these free things. But she's a kind of lost young woman, isn't she? And she has this extraordinary hair, if you can tell us a little bit about the hair. But the contrast between her and the older women, I know which one I'd like to be, and it wouldn't be her. So tell us about Tanya and what she is in relation to the 3 friends. I think we've lost Amanda for a little bit. Oh, I think we might have completely lost you, Amanda. Can you hear us at all? Sorry, everybody. It's obviously Italy's gorgeous to visit, but not.
Well, Tanya is.
Yep. Oh, I think we might have completely lost her. Okay, well, until she comes back in, I'm going to tell you a bit about this book and I'm really sorry about the Wi-Fi. It's such a gorgeous book and it's a fascinating, fascinating story. And Tanya, who she was talking about, she's this influencer and she has a resemblance to Botticelli's Venus. So all of the men in Italy think she's gorgeous, but she's a deeply sad character in many ways. And I think it really shows that difference. Oh, I think Amanda's coming back in again.
I'm back.
You're back. Brilliant. I was just telling people about your book, so you tell us as well.
That's better.
Thank you. Yes.
But Tanya, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry about all this. So Tanya is absolutely beautiful. She's a real beauty. Very often when people talk about someone being beautiful, what they're talking about is someone being pretty and attractive. But I've only known a couple of real beauties in my life, and I think it's a terrible curse. It's like a kind of fairy tale curse because, well, two main reasons. One thing is that all anybody notices about you is how beautiful you look. So you don't tend to develop a personality. You don't bother to develop a personality. But the other thing is that you tend to be very, very friendless because women are madly jealous of you. I'm afraid this is a sort of sad thing about our sex, particularly when young. And men just, want to kind of conquer you or get into bed with you or whatever. So it's an absolutely horrible situation. And to add to that, Tanya has had, something else in her background, which I don't particularly want to reveal at this point, although one or two reviewers have said this, but she has real problems. So, and I myself like her because I find this whole business of influencing quite ridiculous, getting all these free things just because you do a little kind of chat twice a day on Instagram. But when I began to research it more deeply and to think about it, not only did I discover something absolutely horrific, which is true to life, which I used for Tanya, but I also began to feel really sorry for her. It is a curse to be like that. And so it was, although this novel has many different strands, some of them less serious and some more serious, the climactic wedding at the end of it, is not there as a kind of rom-com type finale. It's actually was quite a difficult bit to write.
I bet.
And I hope people will be satisfied with it.
So really, well, we're running out of time. I just want to say you started your career as a journalist. We haven't talked about that at all. How did that help? Did you always want to write novels, or did you start off as a journalist and then get the idea?
Yeah.
Or do you have any fun stories to share from your time in Fleet Street?
No, I never particularly wanted to become a journalist. I mean, obviously, it's useful from the point of view of meeting lots of different kinds of people. But, and I don't at all, by the way, despise journalism, but it is a completely different skill. I always knew that I probably wasn't going to make very much money as a literary writer. So in those days, 30 years ago, you could still get a mortgage, if you combined journalism and books. But, no, it was always fiction for me. And, unfortunately, and there's no shame in saying this, pretty much everybody, and by everybody, I mean, 99% of novelists now earn less than the minimum wage, which is why, if people enjoy fiction, then please, buy our books, or even borrowing them from a public library helps, because otherwise there will be no next generation. It's really got that serious. I mean, fiction should not be something that only an elite with private incomes can do. It's really, really important that you know, it's open to everybody with talent. So that's a kind of serious bit.
I agree, absolutely. And I mean, have you seen, you said you've been in the industry for 30
and, you know, I have been very lucky. I've written.
Sorry, I was just going to ask how you've seen the industry change in your kind of 3 decades of working as a novelist.
Sorry, the industry.
How have you seen the industry change? Can you hear me, Amanda?
How it's changed. 35 years ago, there was something called the Net Book Agreement, which set the prices of books at a certain level. You may notice that cinema tickets now, you know, tend to be around 15 to 18 pounds. And that is what indeed my novel is, and that is a fair price for a book. If you go onto Amazon, you can probably get it for 12, and that may seem like a terrific bargain. The difference between that £12 and that £15, my ability to continue writing, that is the margin that you are, you know, we get a tiny bit from Amazon. So you basically only make money now as a novelist if you are, you know, a multi-million seller like J.K. Rowling. Now, you may think that's wonderful, but there are many, many wonderful books that people would love that are not Harry Potter. And it's really important that we have these. And it's simply unaffordable to continue writing if people just buy from Amazon. I know many Kindles, but if it's at all possible, please buy the actual book from an actual bookseller.
That's really
very serious.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Amanda. I'm just going to put your website into the chat for everybody as well. And just a reminder that the book has just come out. I believe it literally just came out, didn't it? Or is it out next week?
Yeah. Yes, I've got the copy and
I've got my proof.
Yes. Thank you.
Places.
Yes, I have mine, which is there, the other way around.
This is the perfect Goldster novel. I promise you're going to love it. I think you start reading it, you won't be able to put it down. I was eking it out though, because I didn't want it to end. I got so involved with the characters. I just really caught up in the story. I really loved it. So do tell your friends about it, everybody. And Amanda, thank you so much for coming along. And I'm sorry you've had to cope with difficult Wi-Fi, but I hope the rest of your time in Italy goes.
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry. It will be lovely. It will be lovely.
Thank you. I'm just going to quickly tell everybody what is coming up on Goldster.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. So we have on Tuesday next week, Humphrey is doing a special PPG live from Riverstone. And this is with the chef Salia Mahmoud Ahmed. And she is going to be doing kind of cookery classes as well. If you're not lucky enough to go to Goldster Live, please do join in as well and watch it online. And you've got a week of Humphrey. On Thursday, the 22nd of June, he's interviewing the author Michael Davis. And then on the 23rd of June, he's interviewing Ellen Cheshire. I shall be back again on Thursday, the 29th of June, when I'm interviewing a woman called Felice Hardy. She's written a really fascinating new book, a true story of the tennis champion who escaped the Nazis, which is also about one of her ancestors. And I've just received it. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but she's really fascinating when I've looked at the research that she's done. So, and our book of the month this month is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. So if you haven't got it yet and you haven't started reading it, do so. It's a little slim, tiny novella, and it's really wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for coming along and for your lovely messages in the chat. Amanda, thank you. Take care, and I will see you all soon. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.